The mud of Flanders was a special kind of hell, a churning, sucking mire that smelled of rot and cordite and things too terrible to name. It was here, in the freezing winter of 1916, that Private Arthur Lynch first saw it. Huddled in a waterlogged trench, his breath pluming in the air, he wasn't watching the German lines. He was staring into the skeletal remains of a copse of trees, a place made of shadows and splintered wood. And that's when one of the shadows detached itself. It was tall, impossibly so, and thin, a mere sliver of absolute blackness that seemed to drink the scant light from the star-pocked sky. It had no face, no uniform, no discernible features, just a humanoid shape that stood perfectly still, observing the trench line. Arthur blinked, his heart hammering against his ribs, convinced it was the fatigue, the gas, the unending terror. But when he opened his eyes, it was still there. And then, as a star shell burst silently over no man's land, casting an eerie, wavering light, the figure was simply gone. He told his mates, of course. They called it trench fever, told him to get some kip. But Arthur knew. He had seen the sentinel, a silent watcher in a world of deafening noise. 28 years later, in a different kind of forest, the Hurtgen, a dark, brooding labyrinth of pine and fir on the German border. It was November 1944, and the war here was a close-quarters nightmare of mud, mines, and tree bursts. A young sergeant from the 1st Infantry Division, a kid from Ohio named Michael O'Malley, was leading what was left of his squad on a patrol. They were lost, the fog clinging to the trees like a shroud, the maps useless. They moved in a tense silence, every crack of a twig sounding like a rifle shot. It was PFC Jenkins who saw it first, grabbing O'Malley's arm and pointing with a trembling finger. Between two massive pines, standing as still as the trees themselves, was a tall, thin, jet-black figure. It was darker than any shadow the forest could cast, a void in the shape of a man. O'Malley raised his M1 Garand, his breath catching in his throat. "Identify yourself," he hissed into the silence. The thing didn't move. It just stood, a silent spectator to their fear. Then as a breeze rustled the pine needles, it simply melted back into the woods, vanishing without a sound. The squad stood frozen, a cold dread settling over them that had nothing to do with the winter chill. They never spoke of it again, filing it away with the other unspeakable horrors of war, a private terror they called the forest shade. But the description in O'Malley's mind, a tall, faceless, and possibly dark silhouette, was a perfect, chilling echo of what a man named Arthur had seen in another war, in another forest, a lifetime ago. The jungle of the Central Highlands of Vietnam in 1968 was a world of wet green and screaming noise. For a 5-man long-range recon patrol, silence was survival. They were crouched in a thicket, observing a suspected Viet Cong trail, their faces caked with mud and sweat. Corporal James Doc Hollis, the medic, was on watch. The jungle was alive, but his instincts were screaming. He felt watched, not by the enemy, but by something else. He slowly panned his gaze across the dense foliage across the small valley, and then he saw it. Standing on a rocky outcrop, clear as day, despite the distance, was a tall, thin, black figure. It was stark against the gray sky, a cutout of nothingness. It didn't move, it didn't scan the area. It seemed to be looking directly at their position. Doc's blood ran cold. He nudged the point man, but by the time the other soldier looked up, the figure was gone. That night, as they lay in their defensive perimeter, they heard something moving through the jungle around them. It wasn't the careful, deliberate movement of VC scouts, nor the clumsy crashing of an animal. It was a light, almost silent stepping, circling them for hours, a presence that filled them with a primal, unreasoning fear. At first light, it was gone. They exfiltrated without making contact with the enemy, but they all carried the unshakable feeling that they had been spared by something or someone else. Doc would later write in a letter home, a letter he knew the censors would never let pass. "I saw death today, Mike, and it wasn't Vietnamese. It was just waiting."
3 wars, 3 continents, 3 different generations of soldiers. On the surface, no connection at all. A private in a great war, a sergeant in the greatest conflict the world has ever known, and a medic in a counterinsurgency war, on the other side of the globe. They spoke different languages, fought with different weapons, and faced different enemies. But their stories, when laid side by side, form an impossible pattern. The descriptions are unnervingly identical. A tall, impossibly thin, featureless humanoid shape, darker than the surrounding darkness, exhibiting a calm, observational stillness. It never attacks. It never interacts. It only watches. It is seen in places of extreme violence and heightened emotion, in the liminal spaces between front lines, in forests and jungles that have become charnel houses. Is it a psychological phenomenon, a shared hallucination born of extreme stress and sleep deprivation, a manifestation of the trauma these men were forced to endure? Perhaps. But that doesn't explain the specificity of the form, a meme of terror passed unconsciously between soldiers who would never meet. Or is it something else? Folklore from countless cultures speaks of omens, of death portents, of creatures that feed on fear or emotional energy. The Irish have the fear darcha, the dark man, a silent entity often seen before a tragedy. Could this be what these men have witnessed? Not a creature of this world, but something drawn to the cataclysmic energy of human conflict, a scavenger on the edges of our self-destruction, an observer noting down our endless capacity for violence. The soldiers who saw it didn't call it by any folkloric name. They called it what it felt like: the Watcher, the Sentinel, the Shade, a silent, static guest at humanity's bloodiest banquet.
The story could have ended there, buried in the footnotes of forgotten after-action reports and the fading memories of old soldiers, if not for Dr. Eris Thorne, a historian specializing in the sociology of warfare. It was in 2004, while digitizing a collection of letters from a World War I archive in London, that he first stumbled upon the account of Private Arthur Lynch. The description of the Sentinel was vivid, unsettling, but Thorne initially dismissed it as a poignant example of battlefield psychosis, yet the image lingered in his mind. Months later, while cross-referencing oral histories from a WW2 Veterans Project, the description returned with chilling force: Sergeant O'Malley's forest shade. The symmetry was jarring. Then came the final piece, discovered in a declassified packet of Vietnam-era psychological profiles. Corporal Hollis's official and subsequently redacted statement about the observer in the valley. 3 separate conflicts, one identical entity. This was no longer coincidence. It was a pattern, a data point that demanded investigation. Thorne spent the next 2 years building a timeline, a spectral cartography of the figure's appearances. He found it wasn't just in these 3 instances. There were whispers of it in the Crimean War, tales from a Napoleonic cavalryman, and even a suggestive carving on a piece of Roman armor recovered from a German battlefield. The figure was a constant, a thread of darkness woven through the entire tapestry of human conflict, always present where the fabric was at its most torn and bloody. Dr. Thorne's research, published in a niche journal, was largely ignored by the academic mainstream, but found a fervent audience online among veterans and enthusiasts of the unexplained. This is how he received the email from a man named Eli Vasquez, a former sergeant who had served in the dusty, sun-scorched hills of Afghanistan in 2010. Vasquez and his team were on a night patrol near a contested valley, moving under the cloak of a new moon. Using an advanced night vision scope, he was scanning a ridgeline when he saw it, a tall, thin, humanoid shape standing on the crest of the ridge. Through the green glow of the optics, it appeared not as a solid form, but as an area of perfect black, a hole in the world that absorbed all light. It was utterly still, facing their position. Vasquez, a hardened and pragmatic soldier, felt a cold dread he hadn't known since his first firefight. He radioed it in, but command saw nothing on thermal, nothing on satellite overwatch. He kept the scope trained on it for a full minute, watching the void, until a cloud passed overhead. When it cleared, the figure was gone. He had never heard of Dr. Thorne's work, nor the stories from Flanders, Hurtgen, or Vietnam. He described the entity with the same words they had used: tall, thin, featureless, and profoundly observing. Vasquez's account shattered the notion that the Watcher was a relic of past wars. It was here, now, still watching, its presence confirmed by the cold, unfeeling eye of modern military technology, a darkness that even our most advanced optics could not illuminate.
So, what are we to make of this? The evidence, while anecdotal, is now a chain linking centuries. The psychological explanation remains the official, skeptical view. The human brain, under unimaginable stress, can conjure archetypes of fear, a personification of death itself. But this fails to satisfy the technological angle of the Vasquez sighting. This leads to more speculative theories. Could it be a non-human intelligence, an interdimensional entity that finds sustenance in the raw, negative psychic energy unleashed by warfare? Or perhaps it is something even stranger, a chronal artifact, a glitch in time itself, a single immutable observer that exists outside of our linear perception, forever present at every moment of great conflict throughout history. It is not visiting these battles, it is permanently stationed at them. The most haunting question is not what it is, but what it wants. Its passive nature is the source of its deepest terror. It never raises a hand, never issues a warning, never offers aid. It is the ultimate neutral party, and its silence is a void into which we pour our own deepest fears. Is its observation a form of study? Are we, in our perpetual state of conflict, merely a subject for its incomprehensible research? Some of the more esoteric accounts suggest that those who see it are never quite the same, not cursed, but marked, burdened with a chilling clarity about the fragility of their own humanity. They have seen the stagehand behind the play of death, and they can never again lose themselves fully in the drama. The battlefields fall silent, the veterans grow old, and the world moves on. But if you look into the eyes of those who have seen true combat, beyond the 1,000-yard stare, you can sometimes see a flicker of something else, not just the memory of what they did or what was done to them, but the memory of what they saw. A shared secret that transcends nationality, ideology, and even time itself. They carry the knowledge that in the heart of our man-made hells, they were not alone. That something was there, with them, a silent, shapeless companion to their terror. The same shadow figure in the trenches of World War I, the dark forests of Germany, the humid jungles of Vietnam, and the arid mountains of Afghanistan. It is a story that will never be officially recorded, but one that will be passed on in hushed tones wherever soldiers gather. It is the legend of the eternal witness, a reminder that as long as we wage war, we do so under the gaze of something ancient, something patient, and something utterly, terrifyingly unknown.